come this event every 2 months. So we will be in this building in the next few months. So I appreciate you coming here for the Hispanic General Meetings. I'm Jaime Torres, the new chair for the Hispanic Leaders Group. Actually, I came here a little bit after Columbus, as you know.
You're right.
And I was involved with this foundation at the beginning. You know, there's a lot of things that happened, but well, I'm happy to be here. And I asked Elena, because people need to know who you are, and she'll give you clear instructions what to do and how long it's going to take. Elena.
Buenas tardes, good evening everybody. I am Elena Kenyo, and I am membership chair. It's my pleasure to see you, all of you, okay? And I'm so glad we have so many people today. I would like for you to introduce yourself, very simple, okay? Only state your first name, last name, the company that you represent. And if you want to add something else, maybe at the end of the meeting, you can exchange business cards, or you can explain a little more about your company or your organization. But for now, especially today that we have such a big group, I will appreciate that you take the time only for your name, last name, and the company or organization that you are representing. So we are going to start. Do you want to introduce the judges?
Go in the back there.
Okay.
No, we're going to do it.
Or we start with...
We end right here.
With Ms. like here. So where do you want, Jaime? I thought to go that way.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Linda.
I'm Linda Mertz. I'm secretary for the board of directors of HLG, and I work for St. Vincent de Paul Parish.
Thank you, Linda.
I'm Efren Garcia, and I'm with the National Alliance for Mental Illness.
I'm Carlos Garcia. Here they have.
The security.
Omar Maldonado, and I've been a member with the Hispanic Leaders Group for a number of years now.
The former chair.
Eileen Wolfington, Casa de Salud, and the Professional Latino Action Network.
Rush Robinson, St. Louis College of Health Careers, and a board member, HLG.
Good evening. My name is Maddie Moore, and I am currently with the Office of County Executive Steve Stinger with the Community Empowerment Division.
And your former job was what?
Deputy Director for United States Senator Claire McCaskill.
And you collecting 2 checks?
No, sir.
Thank you for me. Brenda.
Brenda Garcia with the Hispano La Que Buena, and I'm currently director on the board.
Thank you.
Helene Hilber, I am with the Hispanic Festival.
Thank you,
Adela Penier, AARP.
Ramiro Benitez, a member of Hispanic Members Group.
Dinora Pamarito, correspondent secretary for the Hispanic Leaders Group, and retired.
All right.
I'm retired. I am Doris Poole, and I am a director at large of this group.
Thank you. How about you?
I'm Edgardo Alvira. I work for RX Outreach Pharmacy.
I'm Shagun Babalola, and I'm with the Office of County Executive also.
Thank you.
Andres Incapié, economics student, graduate student at Washington.
Thank you.
I'm Edgar Velasquez. I'm with the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership.
Thank you.
I'm Victor Roca. I'm a board of directors of the Venezuelan Association in Missouri, and I work for Emerson Process Management.
Thank you.
I'm Joseph Lamson, and I'm the president of the Hispanic Bar Association of St. Louis.
Thank you.
I'm Salim Awad. I'm a civil litigation attorney and also a board member of the Hispanic Bar Association.
I'm Camille Froge. I happen to be in transition right now, but I do work for the Women, Immigrant, and Refugee Program.
Thank you.
I'm Sandra Knight, and I'm with St. Louis Community College.
Maria Lecron, Director of the Board, Venezuelan Association in Missouri.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm Danielle Velasquez, not related to the other Velasquez. I work for DB Communications myself and HC Consulting, and I am a member of the board. I'm Dinora Bamario Pantano, and I work for Mitchell Golden Williams.
Tandra Anderson, employee of Ameren, Missouri, or Ameren, Illinois now, and a member of the Ameren Network of Minority Employees.
I'm Carol Menaquick. I'm an elder law attorney, and I wear many hats. I'm vice president of the Hispanic Bar Association. I'm secretary of the board of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and I'm the president of the Bullion Society of St. Louis, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
Karen Oresti, Anti-Defamation League, Missouri and Southern Illinois.
Buenas noches, Guillermo Rodriguez, Webster University and board member.
Stanley Gray with St. Louis Children's Hospital.
Patricia Llanos, Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, Office of Minority Health.
Thank you.
Maria Teresa Maldonado, HLG.
Joe Palm, Governor Nixon's office, and Missouri Department of Health.
John McCullin, senior judge or retired judge. I wear both titles.
Rich Goldenhersh, I'm on the Illinois Appellate Court. I work for the state of Illinois.
Thank you. There will be a quiz for the guest inviters to see if they remember the names. We've got the formality we will do. We could do the aspect of the meeting, very sweet, so that you know what we're doing. And Elena is the membership chair, and she's going to be the membership report.
Okay, great year. 2015 is unbelievable, great for the Hispanic leader group of Greater St. Louis. Since, well, January, start of January and February, we have several new members, including Adela Pubnat and Daniela Velasquez, Jalesia McQueen, and Slate Organization. I have one application for board approval that is RX Outreach Organization. So in 1 month, we have 5 new members, and I want to thank you very much. I have with me applications for individuals or organizations. If somebody wants to become a member today, or take the information home, I have all the information for you. So you can talk to me at the end of this meeting, and I wish you the best today, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, you have a minutes for the previous general meeting in December?
I do. The meeting was held on December 10th of 2014, and this was our annual membership meeting where we carry out our elections. Our facilitator was Guillermo Rodriguez, and we had 7 nominations for 8 open board positions, which all of those nominees were accepted for a term. If you would like to have more detail as far as these minutes, if you want to see me after the meeting, I'll be happy to take your name and I can either email you a copy, or I hope that it may be soon on our website. Under miscellaneous business, we have an announcement of Hispanic Capital Day being March 11th of 2015, and the meeting was adjourned at 8 o'clock.
Thank you. There is a motion to approve the minutes on the previous general meeting. Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Members? Thank you. Jomo Castro is our treasurer, but he's actually conflict tonight, so I'm going to read what he sent me to me. The current HLG operation account is $2,589.50. $223 of those were expenses in the first board meeting. The HLG Scholarship Fund is currently at $351.48, and the Hispanic Scholarship Alliance holding account is $1,510.95. Jaime and myself and Jomo are full custodians of the HLG operation and HLG scholarship accounts, including debit cards to ease expense procurement when authorized. Jomo will be sending online access for all board members to view the account balances and history to ensure transparency. Deliver membership renewal message through emails, and also deliver invoices through PayPal as an easy alternative to pay with a credit or debit card. Most renewals will gladly be collected personally, but we want to make sure it's easy for your members to renew. Members in good standing, that means people that pay, is 15 individuals, 3 not-for-profit organizations, and 1 small business. Respectfully submitted by Jomo Castro. We will actually motion to approve the financial report.
I motion to approve the financial report.
Second Tola, all in aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The evening is actually concentrated on one event. When we discuss in our board meeting what we'll be doing this year for the 6 meetings we have for the general membership, I thought that the issue ensuing in St. Louis for many, many months was about the perception of justice, what people, law enforcement, felt it was justice, what the court interpret justice, and what the community think justice is like. Ferguson is one of the problems we have had, and of course there are other cities and municipalities that may have similar problems. So we thought in our board to invite someone that would know better. So I thought, because friends in my circle having to be judged. So I asked 2 of them. I'm going to tell you who they are right now. Richard Goldenhersh was born July 16, 1944.
What a baby.
Actually, he's a baby. I was born a little year before him. In East St. Louis, he attended Washington University, receiving his AB degree in 1966 and his JD degree in 1969. After 7 years in private practice, Richard was appointed as an associate judge of the 20th Judicial Circuit in 1975 and became a circuit judge in 1982. He served as circuit judge until joining the appellate court in 1988. He is a member of the St. Clair County and Illinois State Bar Association and former president of the Illinois Judges Association. Richard is a member of the Supreme Court Committee on Complex Litigation, the ISBA Section Council on Civil Practice and Procedure, and former chairperson of the Associate Judge Coordinating Committee. He is married, and he and his wife Barbara have 2 children. Judge Donald L. McCullin, my partner in playing racquetball, attended public school in the city of St. Louis and earned his BS from Southern Illinois University, his MA from Webster University, and JD from St. Louis University Law School, where he serves on the Dean's Council. He is a member of the Missouri, Illinois, and California bars. He began his legal career with a firm of Wilson, Smith, and McCullin, where he partnered with NBA attorneys Wayman F. Smith and Margaret Bush Wilson. He later became a managing attorney for the UAW Legal Services Program, followed by a position with Anheuser-Busch Companies as Director of Diversity and Compliance. Judge McCullin was appointed by Governor Mel Carnahan as Circuit Judge in the city of St. Louis in 1999, and he retired in April 2011. Active in the legal community, McCullin is a member of the Mount City Bar Association. I'm going to ask him what did it. So I was up there. He was right there. So I think that the even talk will be starting with Donald, and you tell him what you're going to tell him.
Thank you. Yes, Jaime, I thank you for inviting me. I think Jaime is a friend of mine. I'm not sure. Because we play racquetball, as he indicated, and as you guess, he must beat me. If I beat him, then he could be my friend. But in my 15 minutes, I've been asked to talk about a variety of subjects, so there might not be as smooth a segue as I'd like, but, you know, bear with me. First, let me talk about the grand jury process. We talked about that process, and It was at the top of the news, certainly with Ferguson. And I talked to one of my friends who's a judge out in St. Louis County. I was in the city. I'm familiar with the process in the city, but because the one in the county was under question, I'd like to talk about how that was formed. In fact, the judge I talked to, he has the current grand jury. That grand jury starts with, the selection starts with 4 sets of 40 individuals. They bring those individuals into the courtroom, they talk about the process, they explain the commitment as to what you'll be required to do. Out of those, 12 are chosen along with 10 alternates. And the reason we have 10 alternates is because the term is from April, let's see, I think it's January 9th to April 15th, typically a 3-month term. And a lot of times people aren't available. They usually meet on Wednesdays, meet every Wednesday. Race and gender are taken into account, and you try and get a grand jury sort of similar to the geographical population in the county. And of course that population is probably about 20% African American and about 80% white. And so your grand jury is going to reflect just that. Sometimes there are challenges to the grand jury pool because of whether or not you've actually got a population, you actually mirror the population. So about 10 pages of instructions are read to the jury, and again, they serve. Most people likely to serve are retired workers, workers who are normally paid full salary by their employers. We look at that. And employees willing to serve, because we know, because it's a 3-month term, some people are not willing to take off for that period of time. And of course, we don't pay jurors a lot of money. If they get $15 a day, it's probably too much. And sometimes we ask them if they'll waive that fee because we need the money. So there was a recent article in Business Week that questioned the use of the grand juries in light of the Michael Brown and the Eric Garner case, because there are several states that don't use grand jurors, and most countries don't use grand jurors anymore. Now I'm going to talk about a name that all of us have heard. I Googled it. I got 220 million hits, and you probably know what that was. Ferguson. Okay. Ferguson has taken a life of its own. That name has taken a life of its own. When someone says Ferguson, all kinds of things come to mind. Looting, burning, police overreach, protest, all those things when we think about Ferguson. Ferguson, we use that name sort of generically in other areas of the country. In fact, it's been used all over the world. Because of Ferguson, when a police shooting takes place anywhere, it makes news everywhere. Protests are sparked across the nation in support of Ferguson. In fact, there's still protests. There was a protest, I believe, yesterday at the Ferguson police station where you may have heard graffiti was on the walls. I can't understand how that was allowed to happen in a police station, but it did.
They detained 5 people.
And they detained 5 people, absolutely. So, but they had the time to put graffiti. It was in chalk. They had time to put it on the walls, and I can't quite understand how you could be in the police department and still have that kind of time. That's a different question. Other incidents have gained nationwide attention that would not have happened because of Ferguson. In the recent Grammys, the Grammys was last Sunday, 2 of those acts had hands up. And so, again, that was Ferguson. We've seen all kinds of things across the country that now it's become a universal symbol. On January 15th, there was an event titled Black and Brown Alianza, intended to bring blacks and Hispanics together. It was organized by the activist group Hands Up Reunited and Latinos and Axion. Pardon my pronunciation. Some of the individuals there, Rosa Clemente from LA, a hip-hop activist. From the Bronx, there was hip-hop duo Rebel Diaz, Chilean brothers Rodrigo Venegas, also known as Rod Stars, and Gonzalo Venegas, also known as G.I. I don't know if you're familiar with any of those. You might have to be younger, I don't know, to be. But let's look at the case of Michael Brown. I mean, that's been at the attention of everyone. We all know something about what occurred. We know there was a struggle around the vehicle. We know Michael Brown was unarmed. We know he was shot several times after that. How we feel depends on who we believe. If we believe he had his hands up and was not charging the officer, we come to one conclusion. If we believe he didn't have his hands up and was charging the officer, we come to another conclusion. There's a saying, the more investment you have in your beliefs, the harder it is to change them. The jury had both facts before them. And I can remember when I was on the elevator, and we were on our way, me and another judge, we were on our way in the elevator, and one of the things he said to me kind of stuck with me. He said, well, I guess I'll go listen to some perjury. And I said, wow, you know, he's right. Because you wouldn't have a trial unless people differed. And so he's right, you are going to listen to some perjury. The jury had both facts before them. The facts were muddied in part because of the way they were presented. The prosecutor admits he allowed evidence to be presented that he knew was false. The jury was given improper instruction as to the law that was never fully explained. There were issues about how the evidence was presented, issues about whether the prosecutor, who has a close relationship with police officers and whose father was killed by an African American, should have been the one to present the case. All those issues arose. The constant refrain is Black Lives Matter. When there is a confrontation, an officer may have several legal options. It's possible the option he chooses may depend on how he feels about black lives, Hispanic lives, or life in general. Darren Wilson said Michael Brown looked like a demon and felt as if he didn't shoot him, he might hurt others. But what are some other options we might have? One option in police training, it was in the newspaper about a month ago, is called tactical retreat. That is backing away until help arrives. The officer can keep the defendant in sight until help arrives. The St. Louis police are skeptical about tactical retreat, and they call it cowardice retreat. The St. Louis County Police Chief Belmar believes changes can be made in verbal and body language and positioning skills. Using profane language can inflame an encounter. Instead of fleeing, you have to shoot because you're being run over. Don't get in front of the car. Ferguson police are considering the use of a device called the alternative. You may have seen it in the news. It's a device you put on the barrel of a pistol and you can shoot it. It might break a rib, but it won't kill the individual. It's I am Michael Brown versus I am Darren Wilson. What gets lost in the language is when someone raises their hands, they are not indicting all police officers. And when a police officer says he is Darren Wilson, he does not believe all protesters hate all police. A similar case occurred in August 2013, but did not make news until recently. It was the case of John Gear. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It certainly was in the Washington Post. In August 2013, a year before the Michael Brown incident, in Springfield, Virginia, police officers responded to a domestic dispute at the home of John Gear. Gear stood at a storm door with his hands up. He was shot by a police officer, Adam Torres. On the way to the scene, Officer Torres was having a heated domestic dispute with his spouse, and we don't know whether that had something to do with his anger or not. The case is different from Michael Brown in that 4 police officers, one of whom was a lieutenant, and 2 civilian witnesses, all said he had his hands up, and the other officer said they never considered firing at Gear. Officer Torres said he saw Gear move his hands to his waist and thought he was reaching for a weapon. The prosecutor recused himself and gave as his reason Torres had a meltdown and cursed at an assistant prosecutor, and so he gave the case to the U.S. attorney. Another reason he gave was he couldn't get anywhere with the Fairfax Police Department. The U.S. attorney did nothing, so the case nothing has happened on the case. It's been over a year and nothing has happened. There's currently a wrongful death lawsuit filed, and as a result, the court has ordered past files released, and that's how we found out about it. Another outgrowth of the incident in Ferguson is the call for court reform. In 6 years, St. Anne revenue jumped from $500,000 to $3.5 million, from 2,000 tickets to 9,000 tickets. Edmonton mayor chastised police, told them to pull out their ticket books more often, told it would affect their pay. Next month, tickets doubled. The system discriminates against people who are poor and typically black because the municipalities are municipalities that are poor and typically black. An organization called Missourians Organized for Reform and Empowerment, better known as MORE, the acronym, raised 10 proposals. 1, eliminate all fines and fees and cancel all warrants. 2, abolish or consolidate the municipal court system. 3, abolish jail time as a punishment for nonviolent offenders. 4, assess fines of nonviolent offenders in proportion to income. 5, cap the amount of revenue to $5 per resident. 6, offer community service. 7, eliminate the failure to appear charge. In other words, when you don't appear, you get another charge. Provide public defenders to indigent people. Eliminate the suspension of a license for failure to appear. Additional accountability around racial profiling, that was 10. There's also a St. Louis County Municipal Court Improvement Committee. And they were formed, it's 82 municipalities, and they were formed in order to stave off legislation. Hopefully, if they could reform themselves, then they wouldn't have to have more stringent legislation. Their suggestion was to base fines on ability to pay, to not issue arrest warrants for failure to appear, and to allow jail time served in one jurisdiction to be credit for time served in another. What was happening to individuals is one individual would be locked up to serve time for a particular offense, and then there'd be a warrant in another municipality, and they would be shipped off to that municipality and have to serve time again. In the courthouse, we give concurrent sentences or consecutive sentences. And that would be a concurrent sentence, and they could get credit for that. To give instead of a fine an alternative of community service. I talked to a friend of mine who's familiar with the city courts, and he says right now, because of Ferguson, they're really afraid to lock anybody up. You know, they're giving alternative service, and they really don't know what to do. And there's been a reaction the other way. I mean, when we had Ferguson, with that first Ferguson encounter, you had riot gear, you had all kinds of stuff. And now I think the police have probably attempted to go maybe too far the other way sometimes. And so, in reaction to the criticism that they've had. There are other proposals for legislative reform. One is consent searches should have written consent. In other words, a police officer stops you and says you gave consent, and you say, well, no, I didn't. Now it's your word against the police officers. So they'd like to have written consent. Banning the box on forms to establish probable cause. In order for an officer to search your car without your consent, he has to have probable cause. So there might be boxes that they check, you know, with the set of facts that would give them probable cause. They want those officers to write that out so that they can give the facts as they see them, and then the establishment of whether or not you have probable cause. Data no longer rolled into the aggregate. What we do now is in municipalities, the police officer stops someone, they record the race of that individual. In fact, Hispanics have complained because they have been coded as white. And so they like to be coded as Hispanic, because then you get an idea of who's being stopped, and you get a better picture. What they would like to do is, instead of having those stats in the aggregate, to have them by the individual. In other words, each police officer would have his own stats. Each police officer would have a PIN number. And those stats would follow that police officer. And if that police officer goes to another jurisdiction, then that jurisdiction should know that police officer's behavior. And actually changes to the law of expungement. And professional licensing of police officers. Currently, police officers aren't licensed. And that was Professor Goldman over at St. Louis U. He made that suggestion also. There are other changes that are likely to result from Ferguson, and that's civilian oversight boards. In the city of St. Louis, it's gotten out of committee. Looks like it has a good chance of passing. Doesn't have subpoena power. I think Mayor Slay said he would veto it if it had subpoena power. So it looks like it will pass. Body cameras. More and more police officers now are using body cameras. There was some issue as to privacy. You go into a house with a body camera and you might see things that you shouldn't be on camera. Minority recruitment of police force, special prosecutors, and a special prosecutor. When a police officer is the subject of an indictment, then perhaps there should be a special prosecutor rather than the prosecutor who works closely with that police officer. There are some problems and some possible solutions. The problem, as I see it, and I'm sure you may see some other things, drugs is one, addiction, mental illness, poverty, joblessness. Some of the solutions as I see them. Recognize there is no one fix to solve all, and there is no rapid solution. In other words, no matter what you do, these things are not going to change overnight. It's going to be a slow process. Create jobs. We're taking steps to do that. Diversity on the force. Recreational activity. I used to be a substitute teacher in the St. Louis Public Schools, and I had all kinds of problems at first, but what I learned is if you don't keep them busy, they will keep you busy. And so I think that's the same way with the population. In other words, if you give them recreational activity, you give them jobs, you give them a reason to prize possessions that they've rightfully obtained, then you stop some of the behavior. Police training, we talked about some of that. Parental involvement. Courts focusing on certain activities, and right now the focus, of course, is on guns and violent offenders. I think Jennifer Joyce indicated that they're tracking now violent offenders, and they are spending more time paying attention to those. Increased mental health programs, also mentoring programs. Those are the solutions that I see, and I'm sure you might see more, and that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Great talk. Very good. Q&A will be after preachers speak. Your chance. Okay, great. Well, Judge, I appreciate your comments and your view, and my late wife actually wrote her PhD thesis on substitute teaching. You've been in combat, I understand.
I'll tell you, one incident, I didn't want to go back to that school.
I understand, I understand. Well, let me approach this in a different way. I'm going to focus on the concept of what is justice, narrow down to a few points in it, and then explain how we handle the grand jury system in Illinois and the practical and the legal aspects of it in Illinois. Speak up if you can't hear me. I've been threatened by court reporters that I speak too softly, so if you can't hear me. And then I'm going to talk about Ferguson and the incident in Staten Island, New York, with Eric Garner. So let's start. What is justice? My favorite biblical quote comes from Micah. He has told you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God. So what does that mean? The commentaries indicate the demands of justice, which means the formalities and external aspects of justice, civil and criminal, and the requirement of performing in the spirit of the law. What's the intent of the law? Beyond its formal and its formal demands and requirements. We're going to focus on the criminal law. I'm going to focus on the criminal law, both the formalities and the spirit of the criminal law and what this means. And I'm going to start with the concept of the grand jury system, its standard in history, how we handle grand juries as a practical matter and statutory matter in Illinois, and compare the Ferguson incident with the incident in New York with Eric Garner. The grand jury is a concept that comes from Old English law, from English history. We adopted it in the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. It was intended in medieval England to be a buffer from the king's arbitrary political prosecutions, which were numerous. The people in the area who constituted the grand jury knew the potential victim, a potential defendant, the victim, and the reputation of both, the good, the bad, whatever. The Fifth Amendment was adopted by the framers of our government as a formal check on prosecutorial authority and potential misuse. And it has been adopted by virtually all of the states in constitution or statute. What I'm going to talk about as far as Illinois is from the Illinois statutes on grand jury. There's an old saying that a good prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. A good prosecutor can also present the facts to a grand jury and the grand jury can endorse a decision not to prosecute. And the grand jury can also resolve some cases that are somewhat controversial. And let me find this. I got to read you this. This is really good. I got this from the Illinois Bar Journal. A prosecutor in southern Illinois had a case. A woman had shot a man fleeing her home. The man in question had, while drunk, entered her home in an attempt to visit her granddaughter. When he refused, the grandmother got her gun and demanded he leave. She shot him in the backside while he was leaving through a window. The Jackson County State's Attorney's Office was split on whether to charge the woman, so the charge was submitted to a grand jury, which returned a no true bill, in other words, no indictment. And I have been waiting for a case which will happen one of these days where some meth user tries to steal anhydrous ammonia from a farmer about 3 in the morning, and he won't be able to sit down for 6 months because I know I'm going to see that case. So, what's the duty of a prosecutor? The duty of a prosecutor is not to bring a bad case. It's not to put a citizen through the fighting a bad charge, the financial burden, the possible prison, the destruction of their good name. I remember, and a number of us in this room are old enough to remember, Ray Donovan, who was Secretary of Labor in the Reagan administration. He got indicted for something, I don't remember what, you might remember what it was. He went to trial, he got acquitted, and the news came after him afterwards, you know, and he was coming out of the courtroom, and they said, "What do you think?" He said, "I'd like to know where I get my good name back." There's a reason to turn down a case. A prosecutor has an ethical duty as a lawyer not to put a bad case up for trial, either by grand jury or by criminal complaint or information. It's an ethical duty. Now, the way we handle grand juries in Illinois, and it varies by counties, by population, everything in the statutes are structured with Cook County, of course, being huge. So it's, you know, counties over 1 million and then gradations down. So in southern Illinois, which is my area, it's generally 16 persons are picked for a grand jury. A quorum is 12. They meet periodically as the state's attorney or the chief circuit judge calls them to meet. They can exist for 18 months maximum, but they're not meeting every day or every week or anything. They have a right to subpoena witnesses. They have the right to question witnesses. They have the right to subpoena documents. They can consider a criminal indictment even after a judge in a preliminary hearing has found no probable cause. So, for example, when I was a trial judge, I had hundreds of preliminary hearings. If I found no probable cause, the state's attorney could still take it to the grand jury, and that happened on an irregular basis in our county, in St. Clair County, but it happened. What is the judicial standard, both for the grand jury and a judge having a preliminary hearing? Did a criminal act occur? Was the defendant involved in the criminal act, in participation of it, in whatever degree? If so, there's a finding of probable cause. The state's attorney or the assistant state's attorney would explain to the jurors what the statute says, what the possible charges are, and it would be the grand jury's decision whether to indict or return what's called a no true bill, no indictment. A witness can come with an attorney, and they can be with their client in a grand jury room in Illinois now. They cannot participate in a preliminary hearing, and all of this is in secret. You can be held in contempt of court and charged criminally if you reveal what a grand jury did or asked when they decided not to return a criminal indictment. We don't have a situation, I've never heard of the situation like you had in St. Louis County, where the records were opened, but it's a different state and it's a different system. What's the difference? The grand jury is in total secrecy. The preliminary hearing is an open court hearing. It's like every other court hearing in Illinois with the exception of juvenile court and some parts of a custody case. The state presents its evidence. The defendant's counsel can cross-examine those witnesses, and even though it's very rare, put on their own witnesses. It's all open, it's all on the record. The role of the defense attorney as a practical matter is advising his client what to do or not do, explain their constitutional rights, and then they sort of sit there and cross their fingers. And that includes the right to remain silent. To return a bill of indictment, you need the vote of 9 grand jurors. If a person is charged, the defense attorney gets a transcript of what happened in front of the grand jury. That's part of what we call the discovery process, where we have a list of requirements we want the state to produce, and they're supposed to produce it, including a transcript of the grand jury. And having defended a few people who have been indicted, it's awfully depressing reading. So, but you are allowed to get that information if your client's indicted. In Illinois, 30 days after an arrest, a defendant has to be brought either in front of a grand jury or come in front of a trial judge with a preliminary hearing. Now, my experience is I was never a prosecutor. I never handled a grand jury and never appeared in front of a grand jury. As a trial judge, though, I handled hundreds of preliminary hearings. Standard's basically the same, like I said, whether there's a criminal act and whether the person who's the focus was involved in the commission of that crime. As a practical matter, grand juries are used for heavy-duty felonies, murder, things like that. In smaller counties, it's so time-consuming and expensive to call grand jurors. They usually use preliminary hearings. They are used sometimes in heavy felonies to get testimony under oath, to preserve testimony, and to get hold of documents and subpoena documents like medical records. So even in the smaller counties, it's sometimes used. So those are the contours. Let's look at the cases. Ferguson. Ferguson, from an outsider's viewpoint and reading the paper, which is all I know about it, it apparently was not a usual situation. You had contradictory versions of events. You had an officer who testified, did not assert their Fifth Amendment rights. Now, if you're representing someone and you let them testify in front of the grand jury and not assert their Fifth Amendment rights, you have to be pretty confident about your case, because whatever they say can be stuffed down their throat at trial. Apparently, the officer's lawyer was confident of his client's case. The case had a lot of credibility problems. A fight for the gun, actions of Brown, blood on the scene, size of both combatants, and etc. Now, like I said, I've never been a prosecutor. I have talked to former prosecutors from Illinois, Missouri, and Kansas, and all of them have said that if it had been their decision, they would not have charged the officer and the grand jury was right. Let's look at the other situation I mentioned, and that is the situation with Eric Garner in New York and Staten Island. New York is 5 different boroughs. Staten Island has its own system, and it calls its own grand jury. You had a video. You had the body camera. They're not perfect, but they do show something. And what did they show? They showed the use of a chokehold, which the New York Police Department had prohibited, and the continued use of the chokehold after Garner was down and from the video at least, it looked as if he was incapacitated. At the same time, simultaneously with that, you had an officer on his back, leaning on his back, which basically means you had a chokehold around the neck, and with the other officer, you had pressure on Garner's diaphragm. You have him saying a number of times, and it's somewhat in dispute how many times, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." Now, Garner was bigger than any of the officers. You had 3 officers, one on the chokehold, one on the back, one, I think, if I remember correctly, trying to keep his legs down. They had him down. That was the situation, and they kept the chokehold, they kept on his back, they had him down. He seemed to have been disabled by the officers, at least from the appearance of the video. He was also involved in a much lesser degree of criminal activity. He was selling, cigarettes that were untaxed, a cigarette, however much the cigarette would cost. Again, referring to the opinion of my experts, the grand jury got it wrong, and some charge against at least the officer applying the chokehold would have been very reasonable, and they would have charged that officer to some extent, maybe not murder, but some sort of criminal charge. These are tough judgment calls in a tough business. Criminal law is a tough business. As citizens, it's always good for us to monitor our government, whatever our government does. And also, as lawyers, because we're, all the prosecutors and the defense attorneys, the chief judges in the circuits are lawyers. As lawyers, we have to meet the highest standards of our profession, whatever our rule, and very frankly, whatever are the consequences of meeting those standards. We as citizens can decide whether those standards are met. We're entitled to that opinion. The judge and I, as lawyers, can also make those decisions as to whether they were met and how. There will be disagreements, but there's never any reason not to attempt to meet those standards. I would be delighted to have any questions on either or both of these cases, and I'll give you my opinions on whether the standards were met. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate great information. We have an opportunity to question and get some answers. I will suggest that not give you a speech. Get straight to the question if you can, and we move forward. Karen.
Thank you, Your Honors. The juror who is requested to be allowed out of the oath of silence in St. Louis County, the grand juror, from your perspective, what do you see happening with that case? I know Mr. McCullin was on the news saying basically their opinion was they didn't like it. No surprise. What do you think from a legal perspective is the result in that situation?
From a legal perspective, I don't think there's any law
Yeah.
on that issue. I think it's looked at as somewhat different. In other words, the juror is not saying I should be allowed to speak under ordinary circumstances. What the juror is saying is, Bob McCullin, you spoke, and you talked all about the case, and I think you overreached when you did that. And I'd like to speak also. If you didn't speak, then I wouldn't have any need to speak. And so at least there's an issue raised. I think the American Civil Liberties Union has taken the case. And they feel that that's the distinction, that in that particular case, not in general, but in that particular case, then the juror should be allowed to speak. I don't know what's going to happen to it, but it would not shock me if they allowed this juror to speak. It wouldn't shock me either way.
I can't imagine that an Illinois judge would let him speak. Now, since there are federal actions going, he might wind up speaking in that context, in that jurisdiction. But I can't, with the secrecy requirements of our grand jury system and with the sealing of the records, if there's no indictment returned, I can't imagine a circuit judge would let him speak.
Jomo?
So just building on that, I mean, is it time to lose the shroud of secrecy? I mean, you know, it's like, you know, we have, I mean, you know, you quoted this coming from Old English, you know, I mean, what century are we in?
Well, you know, actually, we are in the 21st century where if you sneeze, someone will report it on Twitter and
That's
Facebook
right,
and work
absolutely.
it.
You're absolutely right.
And we actually have more of a reason to keep the cloak of secrecy now than we did from medieval England and early America, because I'm not sure how you take a private action or a private opinion in this part of the 21st century. So actually, I think the secrecy should be kept and reinforced.
So then how do you prevent, you know, one side kind of creating their own narrative? Because that's what's happened here, right? You know, you've got Bob McCullin that's created his own narrative, and he controlled all the proceedings, and now you got a juror that's saying, hey, that's not exactly how it went down.
The First Amendment allows both to do it.
Yeah.
And so you've got a countervailing force, I think.
I know in court what we have, I know at the circuit court level, we have what we call the doctrine of curative admissibility. And what that means is if you cross the line, the other party is allowed to do the same thing, where under ordinary circumstances they would not have been allowed. Yes.
Omar?
So, when justice is perceived as not being upheld, whether that perception is true or not true, right? The community in general feels vulnerable, and because of that, what are your thoughts and ideas on how to repair that mistrust?
And I think that's what's going on right now. I mean, in other words, there's a reaction to the protest, the looting and the burning, and the whole issue is what do we do? In other words, what do we do for the future? Do we have body cameras? The body cameras have done that. Do we have police training? In other words, the theory is if we get those things, perhaps we can correct the system. And those things would never have been on the table except for Ferguson. But you can't do anything about Ferguson. Ferguson is over. But you can, there have been some stages and some steps to try and make some corrections for the future. Yeah, go
Well,
on.
and follow-up question to that is, though, is I can come dressed up, looking professional, so my outward appearance is such. But if I don't change that internally, then I'm just portraying myself as a professional. So what are we doing within these organizations to make sure that just because we're getting body cams or just because we're putting these other tools into place, what are we doing to really change the culture? That way, no matter what, whether or not I have that body cam, whether or not I'm using that special piece that goes on to a firearm, that I'm still utilizing those beliefs, and that culture is a main part of these organizations to make sure that we're doing our best for the community. So getting back to what people feel, and I understand people have different definitions of this, but many times you'll hear people, well, what about to protect and serve?
Part of it is training, and a friend of mine works at the EEOC, and right now he's been asked to train the police officers in pretty much all of the municipalities. And it's hopeful that with that training that they can understand just, perhaps where they've erred and what they can do. I mean, like I said, there's no quick solution. There's just no question. And it's a slow process. And we all have inherent biases. And so that's going to happen. As long as there are differences, there are going to be biases. And so it's difficult. It's really a difficult problem. Those are some of the stages. To try and change the culture is very difficult. Very difficult.
And part of an elected state's attorney's professional obligation, I think, and many of them agree, is public education. Here's what we do with the police. We didn't indict, and here's why. We didn't charge, and here's why. We are going to charge, and here's why. And they, within certain pretty broad parameters, as long as they don't basically prejudice the jury pool, they are allowed to make their comments and their statements. I've been a judge for almost 40 years. I've heard state's attorneys say, you know, if there's any question, we're going to charge, and the people have the right to a trial. And I've heard state's attorneys get in front of the media and explain this is a criminal charge, a felony charge is a drastic measure, unless I'm sure I'm not charging a citizen. They have the opportunity to get up and explain their position. They should explain their position. It's part of their professional responsibility. So,
Rush.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And then Matty.
It's interesting to me. I run a school that trains people from the very communities that have been discussed here, including Ferguson. I think we had 20 students from the Ferguson area when the trouble broke out. From that zip area, we can separate our students by zip. And it seems to me that the police are not connected to the community. Simple, we're talking about the courts. We have students that won't take jobs in certain areas, or they drive to school through, you know, complex routes to avoid certain municipalities because of either they have warrants or the word is out on those communities that you will get, you know, arrested if you're 1 mile over the speed limit. And our students can't afford, you know, the exorbitant fines. But it seems that, you know, this is, you know, the kindling has been there for a while, and that the Michael Brown incident, you know, ignited the spark or whatever, but the kindling's still there. And the isolation of the police force is, I think, a part of that. I attend on a pretty regularly a Regional Health Commission Advisory Board meeting. You know, Ms. Moore has, you know, seen me there. And for the first time a couple of months ago, a police officer was there. Just the Community Advisory Board, the Regional Health Commission. One of the areas that they're now promoting is what they call trauma-informed community, where they're starting to really look at communicating across all of St. Louis what violence and you know, the types of things that are going on, the murders and this sort of thing are affecting the entire community. And so finally there was a police officer there. I didn't see him the last time, but it seems like, for example, we've had police officers here to present, but you don't see any in the room right now. Around. Nope, don't see any. But I mean, you know, some of the, you know, and usually police departments have relied on like a community relations officer rather than, you know, involving the police force in, you know, some of these activities. It seems to me that it would behoove some of the police forces in our, 92 county or 92 municipalities or whatever we have in our metropolitan region, that some of them would start to, you know, allow time for the police officers to attend meetings like this one, meetings of the Regional Health Commission, meetings of some of the other, and not wait until there's another Michael Brown incident, oh, we better start doing this. I mean, this is going to be one of the things that will kind of spread the kindling and not make it quite so flammable.
90%. And that's how they survive. They survive on tickets. And that's why they have an incentive. And if they take that away, they may, because they actually want a merger. And so if they take that away, that may well be what happens. But anyway, go on.
When I was in Indiana University in Bloomington, this goes back, I can't remember years, there was a politician, pretty sharp guy, Richard Lugar. He was senator from Indiana for a number of years. And he was mayor of Indianapolis. And he was able to convince all of the little municipalities to, at some level, band together. It was called Unigov. And he got it through. And as a consequence, Indianapolis has been, I think, a much better community because there is a much greater unity. But you've got all these little municipalities that have no tax base, and, you know, where else are they gonna generate revenue?
To piggyback on what he just said, and what Judge McCullin mentioned, that Senate Bill 5 is on the fast track with what he's talking about. And I was listening to Senator Maria Chappelle Nadal, and if it passes, it's going to be effective in August. If it passes, it's going to be effective in August with the revenues, with the municipalities, with the 10%. But my question is, being this part of this new office from Steve Stenger, with us being a part of the community empowerment, do either of you see anything or have any suggestions of things that we can do or what can be done to, as it relates to what Omar said, to create that trust in the community? Because that's the key element, is that if they need to feel that they trust the people who are supposed to protect and serve, but now looks like the people who are supposed to protect and serve are harassing people. So what suggestions, I'm asking for suggestions of what can be done to create this trust throughout the area?
Hopefully being a political realist in my life, my suggestion just off the top of my head, put aside the concept that any of these municipalities are going to merge or disappear or collapse financially. Just assume that they are standing continuous entities. If you can get regional arrangements between municipalities that have a commonality of interest, and all of them, they're legitimate municipalities under the laws of Missouri, and they're entitled to certain powers under the statutes and everything, and they can work together as equals with a commonality of interest, you can probably develop some regional bodies that can work together and share something. Illinois has a number of regional coalitions of counties, for example, or regional coalitions of sanitary districts or transportation districts that work together as equals. Some of them should exist, some of them are probably superfluous, but they work together as equals, and they're not dealing with someone's trying to take us down. And just from the way I see government work in Illinois, and it does work in Illinois, actually, I would suggest approaching it in a regional manner with municipal entities, either villages or municipalities or special districts that have a commonality of problems and therefore a commonality of interests.
Any comment? Yeah, and I'd like to add, I think the Civilian Oversight Board is one. Increasing the diversity of the police department. In other words, one of the problems with Ferguson was there was, I think, 90% white, the police department, only three. Right,
they had 40-something, like 3 of them were African.
Right, and so, I mean, it's just, even with judges sometimes, people would like to see somebody that looks like them occasionally. And so, and it's the same way with police officers. They can relate, and hopefully the others can relate, because they would be of the same culture. And so those kinds of things, yes.
Yeah.
Patty?
I was wondering, Judge Goldenhersh, in reference to the secrecy of the grand jury, I was wondering if that was partially to be able to protect the divergent opinions on both sides, because some people might fear retribution from other people, either on the committee or outside factors.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's a fact of life that people who are under a criminal investigation are tempted to either coerce or kill people who could lead to their indictment, and that is part of it. Is protection of the grand jurors, as well as protection of those people who are brought in front of the grand jury.
Thank you.
Question?
Adela?
I just want to make a comment. I've been in this community since late 70s as a social worker.
and dealing with refugees. We are well known to have a tremendous amount of people coming in. And one of the wonderful things that we had in that process of refugees was that we bring the police and introduce them to the refugees, which the refugee in turn, they come from a country that were persecuted, you know. So you establish, get to know each other, get to know different groups. I have been part of it, a participant in understanding and enjoying how people understand and build the trust. And this is exactly what, the police has been very kind. They're all in South St. Louis. I mean, I hate when everybody just go against them because they have a big job. It's our tax money paying. And it's true, they need to be educated, but our people also need to be educated. That's Your Honor, thank you very much for being here, but I am a citizen following the history of my relatives, that we must respect one another, and I think we have to teach our children to be more civil and understand. Most of these young people do not know the Pledge of Allegiance. 52 words in the preamble of the Constitution. And I teach citizenship classes. And one of the greatest joy is when a refugee is going to become a citizen, and I will ask him, what are the 52 words of the preamble? They delightfully understand. And they are so proud when they become citizens. So let's not be so harsh with the policemen. I am a total support, and because we are wonderful people.
And I agree with you, and I didn't mean for anything I said to indicate I was harsh with police officers. When I was a child, we called police officers officer friendly. I've never heard that. You know, that's what we said. We said officer friendly. That's the way they were portrayed. But at least I understand the dilemma that police officers are in. There's a proliferation of guns. Just about everybody has a gun. And so if I was a police officer, I know I would fear for my life.
Absolutely.
It used to be a time where a police officer would say he had a gun, and it would be very skeptical. There would be a throwdown or something like that. But now, just about everybody has a gun, and they shoot, and they don't respect police officers. And so, when you're in the position of a police officer, you have a difficult job. There's no question about it.
One thing is, I say Hail Mary almost once every hour for a police one.
Yeah.
I'm the citizen to learn.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I completely agree with the judge.
Thank you, Judge.
Two more questions, Maria.
I just wanted to share something from my experience because I do work for the state of Illinois. Actually, and I work with police officers and that. I work at Chester Mental Health. I'm a psychologist. So I deal with both the social aspects for many, many years and also with law enforcement. But I think that, to me, it's naive to think that this is an issue that's only reflective of a situation of potential profiling or discrimination. I think, to me, what I have seen is a very complicated socio-economic deprivation that has absolutely surmounted to the consciousness of minorities, and it exploded. But I can tell you this changing culture, I know as a behavioral person that in order for you to change your feel about things, you need to change your behavior first. And with practice, then your feelings will be realigned. So right now, in terms of our community, I think there has to be an oversight from the leadership of the community that is absolutely diverse, that will set the parameters of how we play nice. Because it is not about Ferguson. It's about unemployment. It's about harassment. It's about lack of education. It's about lack of training. It's about so many things that it would be naive to think that we're just dealing with this. The leadership of this region for the life of our grandkids, and I have 12 of them.
Oh, boy.
I want to make sure that they grow up in an environment where they have a future. And to me, very, very, very much, we are imploding. We have been imploding for a long time. Look at our geography. Look at our unemployment. Look at our educational system. Don't tell me this is Ferguson. This is much more. And unless we get law enforcement, educators, the leadership, the regional commission, and everyone to invest in a solution, welcome Detroit.
Yeah, I agree. The judge and I have been in the position of the part of governmental authority that's supposed to provide that supervision and leadership. And I also agree that you're absolutely right psychologically. Part of the psychological intent, practicality of the Civil Rights Acts of the 60s was if you change behavior, mindset can possibly change in consequence of that change of behavior. So I agree completely with what you said.
And I want to invite everybody that is here to consider working with the HLG, because we have a track record for many years now of working with the police structure to help us know how to best communicate and how we can be part of the solution in terms of getting those two aspects together. And we're very committed to that, so please consider just learning a little bit more about the organizations and ways that maybe you would be involved in the process.
Don, any comment?
No.
Tola?
I agree, that's all I say.
Okay, good. Tola?
Following the behavior aspect, I am a retired teacher from 25 years, and I have not heard any comment about how important the parents are. I have heard about the police department, I have heard about the communities, but I have not heard about the parents. The parents are the essential, the fundamental, teachers from the time that the child is a baby. I mean, when they come over to a school, they already have 6, 7, 10, 15 years that they have not been at the school, that we have not touched them, that we have not influenced them. So I think that one of the things that I would like to hear more about the responsibility of the parents. Because I hear about the responsibility of the policeman, and I agree with you. However, to me, if a teenager faces a policeman, you have to say, yes, sir. Okay, yes, sir. Respect.
I did mention parental involvement. I didn't go into detail. But one of the problems you have is you've got young parents who are addicted and raising children or not raising children. And so you have a cycle. And we've right now raised a generation of criminals. I mean, that's sad, but it's true. And I don't know how we get around that, but it's going to be a slow process.
From my experience in juvenile court and in criminal court, and we have absent generations, we have absent parents. You're absolutely right, and it's a tough, tough issue, and hard for us to deal with.
I thank you both judges. The check is in the mail.
I appreciate it.
However,
I appreciate
we would
it.
like to present from the Hispanic Leaders Group a memento for this evening. You're going to put in the front of your house so that you can see it. Thank you very much.
Coming to my office tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Don, the same thing for you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. As they sit down, we're going to have 5 minutes. I want to make sure that you want a photo? Okay, photo. We'll get this thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Is the,
okay, all right.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We have some events coming up. I want to announce that the Hispanic Capital Day is March 10 and March 11. Many of these discussions we had tonight, we were meeting with people in Jeff City that may be making decisions, and Joe will be actually in that event. So March 10 and March 11. March 10 will be a reception someplace, is the evening, and March 11 will be the day where we talk to cabinet members, department chiefs, maybe the Speaker of the House, the pro tem, as well as the governor. So if you need to involve with that, you need to contact Felix Tobar or Guillermo A. Rodriguez, which is part of the board of the Hispanic Capital Day. Any major announcements
Now is the
around
time
here?
for
The Hispanic Festival is coming up in
June 24 and 25th, as well as September 25th, 26th, 27th, and don't forget Dia de los Muertos. It is in the first weekend of November. If you're interested, everything will be in the website. That's Hispanic Festival STL. And if you're interested in having a booth, be a participant, you want to sing, you want to dance, whatever you want to do, just give us a call or just send us a message. We are always looking for new talent, especially these young people that I see a lot over here. No? Okay.
Eileen, anything in Casa de Salud that is important to
No, we're just grateful.
remind the people?
We're just grateful to the support we've got from many of you in this
So
room.
Caloco is coming when?
Oh, gosh.
It's November 8th.
November
Is-
8th.
but you
But we
need
did
to
celebrate
save the
5
date.
years, yeah. We celebrated
Save the
5
date.
years, and we want to thank most of the people in the room for that. So, thank
Great.
you.
Anything else?
Anybody else here that you want to say
Before,
something about
Steve,
your organization?
open that door. If you have money in your pocket, you need to leave it here. We need money. The Hispanic Scholarship Alliance is coming up.
So just,
I already announced
Oh, yeah,
your report. Yeah, I did.
Well, no, I got a Assembles announcement.
It's making easier to pay the dues for the Hispanic Leaders Group.
No,
Much
no,
easier.
the announcement is on a different group called Assembles. Our scholarship application is due February 20th. So it's designed for Latino students, 25 and under. Last year, we delivered 13 scholarships in St. Louis. We hope to do something similar this year, so if you know someone, please apply.
The next general meeting will be April 8th, and the theme will be about employment. Michael Holmes is Executive Director of St. Louis Agency for Training and Employment, will give a great representation because an issue in our community is employment. And they have every day, he sent me opportunities, openings and openings and openings. People are not applying. All levels, engineers, nurses, teachers, clerical, administration. So I asked Michael Holmes to come to his assistant to explain what is the process. And the process is very interesting because if you employ through Slate, the company that hire you, they pay 6 months, 50% of your salary. It's a lot of great things that happening in our region. Metro East, if they want to work in St. Louis, I'm disseminating that information to the Latino Roundtable. So April 8th will be great information coming through our website once we fix it, or email. Last minute. Thank you.
November
Adjourn.
14th. November 14th. Soca Loco. Sorry.
November 14th, okay. A motion to adjourn, second. All aye. Gracias, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Great.
Judge, excellent. Thank you.
Actually, we're gonna do a little thing when the temperatures are better.
I understand.
Yeah, there is application.
She said they didn't know if we were
Gracias, no he aplicado la nota de los niños. Así que a las 9 tengo una hora más.